For the Investing News Network, I'm Brian McGovern, here today at the Cannabis Lift Expo show from Vancouver. I'm here today with Diane Scott, the CEO of Jamaican Medical Cannabis Corporation, or JMCC. Diane, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So Diane, can you provide a little bit of background on exactly what JMCC does and sort of the role that it plays in the cannabis industry, first of all?
Absolutely. JMCC is the premier provider of Jamaican medicinal cannabis exported to different parts of the world. We have customer contracts today in Canada, Germany, Australia, and recently announced a deal that will take us into Brazil. We cultivate on the island medicinal cannabis only in controlled greenhouse environments, but they're mesh-sided, so in a very natural growing environment to medicinal standard.
So now JMCC is a private company. The cannabis space has sort of seen a rush of listings throughout the past couple of years. Can you talk about not necessarily a projection of whether or not you would like to list, but the idea and the rush of it, and how many times do you get asked about it, or what's kind of like, dealing with that sort of relationship about staying private or going public? What's that thinking like?
Absolutely. So JMCC is founded by SX2 Ventures. That is an international venture capital business that I co-founded in London with my business partner. And so the whole debate on going public or staying private, taking on external investment or not, obviously any business in the industry today, you ask those questions all the time. Particularly when you see the kind of valuations that we see happening in this market, which are quite significant. For us, JMCC will stay a privately held company. We are not going to seek an IPO in any time in the near future, but I completely understand the rush that comes with becoming a public company and almost the wooing of the market. It's a pretty incredible, having done it before, it's an incredible process to go through as a company, as a founder, as an investor. So in terms of how often we get asked, pretty regularly. If not, are you going to IPO? It's how do I invest in you? I think that because we are outside of Canada, because we have a growing, aggressive international footprint, and certainly our story resonates, I think it's kind of natural that people are excited about something that's different in the market.
Yeah. So when it comes to the private money, you mentioned the interest from some of the investors that may just be asking, if you're not going to list, how to kind of get in.
Yes.
There's been sort of a growing conversation about private money as a whole really wanting to get into the cannabis space. I've had the chance to speak with a couple of VCs in the past that have said people are dying to get into this industry, but they're just tied. If they're in the US, they're tied by the regulations or they're tied by the location. Can you talk about sort of the sentiment of the private market and sort of what are the entry points that private investors are looking at with the cannabis space?
Yes. So I'll wear my venture capital hat in that case, and I'll tell you that prior to JMCC, we were investing in the Canadian market space. We were very, very early investors in several companies about 4 or 5 years ago. And the reason we started to get interested is because we, rightly or wrongly, saw that there was going to be a huge opportunity, we thought, in medicinal cannabis. We're not interested in recreational. It's not comfortable for us as investors. But Canada at that time was so far ahead of everywhere else in the world that getting in that early was attractive. For investors coming in now, they're coming along after the wave is really moving. There's a lot of great opportunities. There's a lot of money, private money in the market. But, not only on the investor side, being a founder, you really have to know if you're bringing in private money, who they are, how patient they're going to be, what the expectations are of you as a founder and of your company, and make sure that strategically you're very well aligned.
So you spoke on the first day of the Lift show, the business day, and during your panel, you were sort of talking about the things that the Canadian market has seen and in the past little bit of time. You mentioned that there's a real opportunity for the Canadian companies to export. There's obviously been already establishment between the biggest LPs to set up presences all over the world and sort of distribution networks as well. Can you talk about some of the things that you're seeing moving into 2019 in terms of like the export from the Canadian market out into other markets outside?
Yes. So if we look at the 35 plus countries that have now legalized medicinal cannabis, and you look at where they are, the truth is there's a lot of lessons learned from Canada and other markets that are ahead of them, but also there's an opportunity when you look at them and you say, one, do they have the right growing environment? Two, do they have the funding infrastructure in place? Three, how long is it going to take to get all of the pieces of an industry like the Canadian LP industry in place? And it takes time, right? These things don't happen overnight. Regulators at the beginning are slow and steady, and they should be, right? These things can't rush. So there's a real opportunity, in my opinion, for Canadian LPs that have high quality product to go to these places and import the Canadian product and, quite frankly, the Canadian learnings and the Canadian experience, so that which is a win. By the same token, though, Canada's a free trade nation, and so we can't just go to these 35 countries and export our product. We have to recognize that opens the door, and we have obligations under international treaties to bring product into Canada from other parts of the world. So, it's a balance, and it's too easy just to talk about we're going to export. That's an opportunity. The reality is that opens the door on importation. Obviously, biasly, I think that's going to happen anyway. We have a shortage of supply for our patients, and we need to do that. And as an investor, I think that also opens opportunities here at home.
So another point that you mentioned, the shortage specifically, you talked about this during your panel, the need to address this shortage. Obviously, there's been a lot of conversation about what needs to be done, more licenses or whatnot, but it just seems like it's going to take a little bit of time. But can you talk about from the medical side? You mentioned the point of view that you feel like this is an issue that needs to be addressed like now.
I do, very strongly. Canada is probably, if not one of the most respected healthcare systems in the world. And today, we have patients who don't have access to medicine. It's unacceptable. However you look at it, it's unacceptable. And we know there's a shortage. We know, I think, the last numbers I saw were the entire Canadian LP capability today, capacity is somewhere around 355,000 kilos, and demand is projected next year to be over 800,000 kilos. That's a big gap. Adding more isn't going to get us there as quickly as possible, and so we have to consider new and different and creative ways to meet patient demand. Obviously, importation from highly regulated like regimes, high quality, high security, high safety. That is an answer that I believe that Health Canada and us as a country for our patients needs to look at.
Have you heard of Health Canada or any other leading LPs considering this option of importation?
Oh, absolutely. We have contracts with Canadian licensed producers today that have applications before Health Canada to import our product from Jamaica for their patients here in Canada.
Very interesting. Diane, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
So from the Lift Cannabis Expo show in Vancouver, I'm Brian McGovern for the Investing News Network.